Howdy, and welcome to LeeReads, where I talk about the books I've been reading and enjoying lately. It is the beginning of Thanksgiving week. I work for a few days at the beginning of the week, and then I have the latter part of the week off, so I thought it would be a great time to tackle House of Leaves. This is a book that I've heard about for a while as being kind of a weird book, but I never explored it. When my husband showed me this video of all things, and I'm gonna link this down below, but of all things, a Doom mod that was sort of modeled after the House of Leaves concept. And we watched that video, and then another video about ergodic literature and the House of Leaves and other examples of that type of literature. It's literature that you don't read straightforward and you bounce around. Anyway, that piqued my interest to try this book for myself. My understanding, aside from the fact that I'll need multiple bookmarks because I may need to bounce around and look at appendices and footnotes, is that it also may be a little bit of a story within a story, a main storyline and then an additional one. The primary storyline is about this family who moves into a home and then slowly begin to realize that it's larger on the inside than on the outside, but not in a fun Doctor Who way. One day the children wander off and their voices eerily begin to return another story of creature darkness, of an ever-growing abyss behind the closet door, and of that unholy growl, which soon enough would tear through their walls and consume all of their dreams. So, we'll see if this is too horror for me. Hopefully it's more on the unsettling side, but I just want to experience this read. And I have a fun little bookmark here where I can put it in two different spots. We will see how it goes, and I will be back with an update once I kind of get into the book a little bit. I haven't started it yet. Oh, hi. I've read the first 3 chapters and I am finally getting into the flow of how the story is being told. And as I was led to believe, this is a story told in layers. The dedication is "This is not for you," which is kind of suspenseful and puts you on edge a little bit, you know, to get you in the mood for the story. There's a foreword by the editors, so that's like one set of hands telling the story is the editors, who periodically include footnotes. Then it opens with this monologue or addition or these notes by someone named Johnny Truitt. He and his buddy found these tattered scraps of paper, kind of like a manuscript, from this old man named Zampano that kind of subtly forebodes and warns against this whatever psychological experience the reader of the papers is about to go on, and what Zampano has experienced, because Zampano is dead, and for whatever reason Johnny Truitt takes these gathered bits of paper home and over time starts to read them, and now is telling the story of how, like, he wished he had never done it. If you could ever go back in time and stop yourself from doing something, he would never have answered the phone and gone with his buddy to this old man's house and gotten these papers. The papers themselves that Zampano wrote told the story about this Pulitzer Prize photographer Navidson and his family as they settle into this house in Virginia. The movie that Navidson made, the little documentary that he made of his family in this house, is called The Navidson Report. Something about this house is really wrong, and it's been affecting everyone who has ever lived there. And that's kind of where I am now at the beginning of chapter 4. The storylines have been set up, and I think now we're going to be exploring more of the Navidson Report. But it is interesting that as you're reading the Navidson Report, sometimes Johnny Truitt will put in footnotes that are like longer expositions that are like, really that's how he's telling his story. And then every now and then the editors will put in a footnote to try to like correct or corroborate something that one of the others have said. So it's really layered. It's kind of slow going, especially because I just tend to gloss over footnote numbers, and so I'll get to the bottom of the page, see there's a footnote, and make sure I went back and read it. It is creepy like vibes so far, so we'll see how we proceed into the depths of this house. I have made some progress. Things are really progressing, both with Johnny Truitt's peace of mind and with the house. So the owners of the house, the Navidsons, returned from a really short trip, and they discovered that there's this extra door. So they spend a lot of time, like, they're shocked by this. They go check the house plans, like, no, this closet was not in the original plans. Navidson starts, like, measuring, remeasuring, running a plumb line, remeasuring it, realizing that the inside of the house is larger by just a little bit than the outside of the house. And while he is just focused on figuring this out, his wife kind of is just in denial, pretending it's not happening. That's causing strain on their relationship. And then a dark hallway appears. That's wild. Meanwhile, Johnny Truant, he's kind of rambly. He's funny, which makes his inserts amusing, and it's really good at building up the tension, but also it's kind of like he's losing his mind. It could be because he's often drunk and high when he's writing the footnotes, but he tends to get more rambling, and it's doing a really good job of kind of showing the deterioration of his mind as, like, something, since he started reading the Navidson report, something has been, like, triggered within him, and suddenly now there's, like, a darkness, a sense of fear of being watched, like there's the sensation of, like, a monster or something. It's being demonstrated really well through his sections. And if I wasn't clear, the Navidson report, so the Navidson, the guy, is like a photographer, and he set up all these little cameras around his house when he and his family moved into this new house, because he wanted to make a documentary. He and his wife would have their own personal camera that they would, like, vlog into, basically. Those were compiled into this documentary eventually, but the story that Zampano has written is like a critique of the Navidson Report movie, going in depth about what's going on. But that's the lens through which we are experiencing their story. So even though it's quite observational, it's still quite engaging and compelling. You're just, like, witnessing what this family's going through. It's just hard if you put it down in the middle of a chapter, especially if it's in a footnote and you have to kind of finish that footnote and then remember what was going on in, like, the Navidson report. Yeah, I'm enjoying it so far. It's definitely different. Yes, and apparently there's a discussion. So there's a footnote in here that talks about, like, that the editors put in that are, like, for more background as to why Johnny Truant is like this. You can read more about his childhood in an appendice, and he alludes to something shortly after, but apparently there's two schools of thought. Like, do you go back and read that appendice to get the detail about his experiences as a kid, or do you wait and just read it through and get to the appendice when you finish? So my plan was to read it when I finish the book. I don't know if there's a right answer or wrong answer, but I think that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to read these interviews and things, like, when I get to the back. Forgive the little bells you hear of my pets wandering around me. I have finished my adventure with House of Leaves, and it was fun. It was a fun experience. It was different, seeing how these different stories were interwoven together and how the typography of the book impacted the reading experience. My favorite of the stories to follow was the Navidson families. They're the ones that live in the house, and that storyline kind of went in a way I didn't expect, as they are mounting these expeditions to explore it, and then kind of what results from that. The psychological horror of the house, like, and how it changed. I don't want to, like, say everything about it, because I think that it would be fun maybe for you to try reading this book and tell me what you think. There are a lot of different interpretations as far as what's going on, like in the Navidson report, which is this critical analysis of this documentary, but then also that you gather as you experience Johnny Truant's side of it. So if you recall, Johnny Truant is reading this manuscript that Zampano has written, and as he's obsessing over these papers, he is starting to lose his mind. But what the author does very well is shows you and you experience him kind of going crazy, not just telling you about it. But that also made his sections harder to read, because they would kind of become long-winded. There were parts where it was hard to tell if he was like, Johnny Truant was telling you the truth or not. You're reading the thoughts of someone who is slowly becoming mad from reading this document, the Navidson Report, and hanging over all of it is the house. This psychological horror. Why is it the way that it is? Was all of this real? Why does reading the Navidson Report and learning about the house impact some people as severely as it does, where others are able to write it off as like a hoax or special effects? So that's a lot of like really interesting kind of things to think about with this story. I think a book of this nature, the ergodic literature, is worth giving a try, and I would recommend giving this one a try if you are okay with psychological horror, because that's what this is. Johnny Truant's sections were a little harder to read, but I can understand and see why the author wrote them that way. Although some of his footnotes made me laugh, because he is really funny, and then others of them you just feel like this poor man. But I was a lot more compelled and interested in the Navidson family's side, which is like the bulk of the story, and Johnny Truant is a footnote, and then he's like translating different things, and he's trying to understand what the author of the Navidson Report, Zampano, was trying to say. He seems to grasp the amount of effort and time that Zampano put into writing this, and he kind of wonders over that. How and why did this man feel compelled to like put this together? Is the house real? But I did decide to read the story as a whole first and then read the appendix afterwards. And the main appendice that I found useful was there are these letters to Johnny from someone in his past that really give a perspective as to why Johnny is the way he is, and kind of hint at why he was willing and interested to take on the task of parceling through this manuscript. This was a departure of the norm for me. I'm glad that I gave it a try. I am trying to read more like actual horror. I'm becoming more interested in that genre, but I also would be interested in reading more stories, more ergodic literature like this, where the story isn't straightforward. Prior to this, I think the main experience I ever had with something even remotely similar, even though it's not the same, is like those choose your own adventure, where you would get to the bottom and pick whatever your choice was. You would go to that page in the book and get like a different story depending on the choices you made. From that aspect, this was a different, and kind of stretched me a little bit to try to hold all of these layered bits of the story together, and just kind of the depth of the psychological horror that was happening and the changes in Johnny Truant. That was like the most difficult part to read. I don't necessarily love reading this madness. This is why I don't tend to gravitate towards grimdark. But with all that said, it was still a fun time, and I would recommend giving it a shot. So if you've read this, let me know what you have thought about it. Are you interested in checking it out now? Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this relaxed reading vlog, and as always, don't forget to support your local library. Thanks. Bye.